Welcome into Pac-12 football review here on the Sideline Sports Network. Yes, I'm Michael Caratanito. That's my Twitter handle at Diablos00. It was an insane opening weekend in conference play. There were some games that we talked about on Friday that definitely lived up to their billing. And it was a great weekend of conference play. I mean, very, very few games were really blowouts. 3-point game, said it'd be close. Oregon State, USC. USC had a score late to win that. Oregon State balling out up in Corvallis. And then Oregon and Washington State. Oregon just inched them. And again, I predicted that, but I didn't feel good about it. But Washington, they beat Washington State at home 44-41. UCLA had no problem with Colorado, like we talked about. It's just been real struggles for the Buffaloes as of late. And Cal came back to beat Arizona at home. They move up to 3-1. Quick overview, and they beat Arizona 49-31. ASU and Utah, they mixed it up. They won the game 34-13. ASU did get a late touchdown. They had 2 field goals again the first game under Coach Iguano. And it was, again, there was energy. They played hard, but again, you opened up with the Pac-12 South, champs. So to me, it's one of those things where, again, you knew it'd be tough, but man, we got to start with the Oregon Ducks and the Washington State Cougars, pardon me. Sorry. When Friday said looking at this game, Washington State, again, had one at Wisconsin, went up there, went to Camp Randall week 2 and got the win. And you saw the kind of defense that they were playing. So for me, I knew they could stay with SC. And when you said coming in, the question mark for SC was, their defense. Not that they're giving up they're going to give up a ton of points, but Oregon, not USC. Washington State played Oregon, and I said that. Again, I'm just so excited. I'm just so excited from this weekend. Again, it's just great games. Yeah. So Oregon, for Washington State, like I said, you go into a tough environment. You have this game at home. The Ducks' only loss we talked about was that very, very, beat down from Georgia in week 1 at a neutral site in Atlanta. Yeah, really neutral when you're coming from Eugene to Atlanta, and Georgia's coming from Athens to Atlanta. But that's just me. Anyway, but yeah, that's Oregon's only loss. So you look at that, Bo Nix, the whole team pretty much struggled in that game. Defensively, Oregon had a lot to answer for, but they start conference play at the Palouse. And when you break this down at halftime, it was a 17-9 lead for Washington State. Oregon only put up 6 points Oregon only put up 6 points in the third quarter. And Washington State puts up 10. So now it's 27-15, and you're thinking, okay, you're feeling good. Well, Oregon blew up in the fourth quarter. It was a show. And if you didn't see it, you kind of missed out. I will tell you that. It was an absolute show by Oregon. I mean, they put up 29 points in the fourth quarter. You're thinking, that's insane. Washington State, they put up 14. So you're thinking that's a really good fourth quarter. Okay, well, it is, except for the fact of what Oregon did, and they're able to eke out a 3-point victory over Washington State. And when I talked about the 2 quarterbacks on Friday, Bo Nix, 33 of 44, 428 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had one interception. For Cameron Ward on the other side, just as impressive, 37 of 48, 375 through the air, 2 touchdowns, but he did have a second costly pick. So that was a tough part for Washington State. But still, I mean, 37 of 48, 375. It's not bad at all. And then when you look at rushing, Nikhil Watson, Oregon, I mean, he had 12 attempts, but for 36 yards, he did have a touchdown. They were just held to 53 yards rushing. And you say, well, okay, but they were throwing the ball all over the field with Ward throwing 375. Yes, but Nix had 446, but the Ducks also were patient enough. They didn't have a 100-yard rusher either, but they ran the ball for 178 yards. Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington each had 11 carries. Irving had 81 yards. Whittington 69 yards. Jordan James actually had the only rushing touchdown. 1 yard rushing touchdown for Jordan James. But again, still able to, and Bo Nix chipped in 30 yards rushing. He had 6 carries for 30 yards. So 178 yards with that, with the 446 passing, you would think Oregon, oh man, they only won by 3, considering, like I said, Washington State held to 53 yards passing. But man, both teams just showed out. And if you're the Cougars, again, they're not gonna let this go now. Coach Dicker's not gonna let this get out of control. And for Dan Lanning, it is a huge building block, because Washington State, like I said, I mean, they came out this year, and people say, oh, the Pac-12, and you know how I feel about that. I get with conferences and schedules and all that madness, but it's one of those things for Washington State. Like, you balled out. You played a very solid game, and you're not going to say they didn't play 60 minutes. Oregon played 60 minutes and came out 3 points ahead with that unbelievable fourth quarter. So you can't even fault them for that. It's a tough game to lose on your home field, but to a ranked team, once again, not all that bad. So, but yeah, just the last quarter. I mean, man, it was just insane when you look at. And then, the Oregon also had they had the pick 6, like I said, the 2 interceptions, and Oregon receiving. I mean, Troy Franklin, again, this kid's a beast, and I was so annoyed because I didn't get to him on Friday when I was previewing this game. But Troy Franklin, 5 catches for 137 yards and a touchdown. Chase Cota, 7 for 84, and then Bucky Irving, he didn't have a rushing touchdown, but he had 5 catches for 38 yards and a receiving touchdown. So Oregon, again, they are offensively, they're there. If they're not there, they're getting there. And again, like I said, 446 yards receiving, led by Franklin's 137. But Masai Funa had the interception. He had a pick 6. Trikwezi Bridges had the other interception, but Funa, again, it was a 27-yard pick 6. Washington State trying to get a little something going, and then you have that change of momentum no matter what, no matter how close the score is, no matter even if you're up, say, by 10 to 14 points, and there's an interception and it's a pick 6. Talking to coaches throughout the years and even coordinators, it switches the momentum like that. Not that the other team can't march down again and regroup and score, but it is very tough to rebound from that. But yeah, I mean, overall, great performance from both teams. I mean, I'm not going to say just Oregon. I mean, overall, great performance from both teams. Defenses, yes, the offenses had their way. When you see basically 600 and 626 yards. There's 624 yards of total offense from Oregon. I mean, and over 400 yards, so over 1,000 yards of total offense. This is what baffles me. This is why when I still look at this game, like in getting ready for this, I was like, man, back and forth. But both these teams are going to roll. Obviously, it gives Oregon an advantage in the north there, but at the same time, it's look out for Washington State. They're going to be they are going to be coming. They're going to be coming for people. That's all I know. Again, for Coach Dickert, it's the message you send. That's what I'm trying to get at right now, wrapping this game up. It's the message you send is how you come back. Yeah, you had the game at home. You were up. It was a ranked Oregon team. I mentioned the success Oregon had there overall the last in their overall matchups. I think they were, 15 and I think 6, I said 15 and 6 over here since 1989. But man, when you look at that, that is just absolutely huge. A huge win for Oregon, but a huge still statement for Washington State, letting everybody else in the conference know that they are not going anywhere. And that's again, that's a team that you're going to have to bring your lunch pail with you. That's all I know. You're going to have to bring your lunch pail with you and hope for that. And hope that you can match them, because again, giving up 41 points to Oregon, again, not really or 44 points to Oregon. You put up 41, so you went toe to toe with them. Next week for the Cougs, they host Cal, and for Oregon, they are hosting. So Washington State, yeah, that's a nice little open to your schedule. Stay home the first 2 weeks. Washington State will be hosting Cal, and Stanford will be hosting Oregon. Oh, the battle of the two Phil Knight schools. You Nike fans will get that. But, yeah, that's what they have next. But, again, just overall sick game. I mean, Bo Nix, like I said, I was hard on them in the Georgia game. None of the team really showed out there. I thought, and I mentioned that in the first show, I thought Oregon played way too much into what Georgia wanted to do. Yes, no, you might be an up-tempo offense, but use a lot of the play clock. You get a few first downs. You keep that offense of Georgia off the field a little bit longer. Not that they weren't going to score, not that they were going to win the game, but you could have at least, controlled a little bit more of the possessions, having less possessions. So, but yeah, that's who those two teams have next. And we'll see. We'll get to that on Friday. The other huge game before we get to break, number 7 USC goes up to Corvallis and somehow scores late on a late touchdown from Caleb Williams, who had an insane game, to Mario Williams no, not Mario Williams. I take that back. But they got the late touchdown as Caleb Williams hooks up. Pardon me. Sorry about that. So Caleb Williams hooks up with Jordan Addison. Addison had 3 catches on the day for 42 yards, but none more important than his touchdown on the sideline. And man, it was a heck of a throw, first of all. And Caleb Williams drops back. He had protection, and the safety's coming over, and the angle, he's taking a straight angle for Addison, but he gets there just a split second, literally a split second late. And the offensive line on that play did a heck of a job. Oregon State's defense balled out all night long. You look at USC, yes, they did rush for 177 yards. Oregon State, they wanted to keep the ball on the ground, and they rushed for 153. Jam Griffin had 12 carries for 84 yards, 1 touchdown. And then Deshaun Fenwick had 11 carries for 29 yards, also had a touchdown. But, man, Travis Dye, talked about this kid on Friday for USC. It is just absolutely insane what Dye had. 19 carries, 133 yards, averaging 7 yards a carry. Also did have 1 rushing touchdown. But Caleb Williams, you look at what the Oregon State defense wanted to do. And USC figured, okay, maybe we can take advantage running the ball on them. He said rush for 177. Caleb Williams threw the ball for 180 yards. He was 16 of 36. So, I mean, nothing amazing for 180 yards. He did have the 1 touchdown. And then, but you look at Chance Nolan on the other side for the Beavers, 17 of 29, 167 yards for him, no touchdowns. But this is where it cost Oregon State. This is what drove me insane the other night. He had no touchdowns. He threw 4 interceptions, and yet USC could only win by 3. That's how much the Oregon State defense balled out. Because when you throw 4 picks in a game, I don't care if it's, I mean, obviously Division I level, yes, but you throw 4 picks in a game, and one of them, I mean, was like a punt that was picked off because it was literally Oregon. He's just trying to get it. He's getting it downfield. If you didn't see the highlights, I'm laughing because I jotted this down in my notes. If you didn't see the highlights of the interception that he threw downfield, and they cut away to the Oregon State student section, and I think it was the second interception of the game. They cut away to the Oregon State student section, and their looks are just it's again, it's fans, it's students, but it's priceless. And again, I'm not making fun of them because again, the passion's there. They knew that they came into this 3-0, and if they could beat USC and go to 4-0, it would be absolutely huge. The program hasn't done it in a minute, but still a 3-1. But either way, that check out the highlight of Nolan's interception, and I want to say, I think he was trying to hook up. I think it was to Griffin. But if you check out the highlights of the game, the student section's reaction on the cutaway, priceless. But hey, that's because they love their team. But yeah, overall, looking at this, I mean, it's a good win for SC. You know, the defense, I said, would be the question mark. And they did come up with 4 picks, and the offense couldn't do much against the Oregon State defense. So, I mean, it was a hell of a battle, this game. And like I said, Oregon State rushed. They had 31 rushes for 153 yards. SC had 37 for 177 yards. And passing, I mean, 180 to 167. So you look at yardage, I mean, you're even. And but yeah, on the interceptions, the 4, there were 4 different players. Eric Gentry had an interception. Max Williams had an interception for the Trojans. Mckee Blackman and Sayer Wright had an interception as well. So you look at that, I mean, 4 picks, stopping drives. Oregon State defense didn't come up with any interceptions. But they did have 2 sacks in the game. USC also, they didn't have any sacks in the game. So they were putting pressure on Oregon State quarterback Chance Nolan overall. And I noticed that at the end of the game, I was like, I had to go back and look because I was like, wow, but there is, no sacks registered by SC. Interceptions, hurries, absolutely. But yeah, it's just it's weird. So USC's defense, again, the secondary came up big. They stopped drives, and again, this game, it was a 7-3 halftime game. Oregon State was up. Neither team scored in the first or third, and then SC puts up 14 in the in the fourth, and Oregon State puts up 7. So this was, again, and people say, oh, sloppy, the interceptions. And I mean, USC had one fumble. Travis Dye had a fumble, and they recovered it. But, I mean, yeah, the interceptions you look at, and Nolan was taking shots, and you can do that against this SC defense. Said it on Friday. So, look, the defense is just like balled out. I love that kind of game. It doesn't have, and again, I also love the Washington State Oregon game, 44-41, but it doesn't have to be, it can be a 17-14 game and be a great game. And for SC, this builds confidence. Again, their defense we'll see how much this offense can mask. But to overstate the obvious for you football fans, if they're going to get 4 takeaways a game, guess what? They're going to win a lot of, or 4 interceptions a game, but 4 takeaways, they're going to win a lot of games. Hey, we're going to step aside real quick, and we'll keep reviewing the weekend that was in the Pac-12. We'll get to Washington, see how they did against Stanford. We'll talk Cal, Arizona, ASU, Utah. We'll have all that here on Pac-12 in Review on Sideline Sports Network. All right, back here on Pac-12 Week in Review. I'm Michael Caratanudo here on the Sideline Sports Network. Man, it was a heck of a weekend again in the Pac-12. If you missed it, but well, luckily we have, in this day and age, we have highlights. We have wonderful shows like this. But yeah, so Oregon comes up with a big win at Washington State. USC slips by Oregon State with to improve to 4-0, and going from there, they definitely, USC again, their offense, you can't take anything away from what I think Caleb Williams and this offense can do, but if they're going up against some of these tougher defenses, it'll be very interesting to see what their defense can do. So I look at it like this. For those first 2 games, it does set the tempo, but we haven't heard, obviously, the last of Washington State and Oregon State. So, but we are going to move on now as Washington, the Huskies, they were home as well, and they were taking on the Cardinal of Stanford. Well, they were 3-0, and the Huskies moved up. The Huskies moved up to 4-0 after beating Stanford 40-22, and it was a very balanced scoring attack from UW. They were up 7-0 after 1, 7-7 at halftime, 30-7 at the end of the third, and then they put up another 10 in the fourth to get to 40, and Stanford put up 15 in the fourth. But that defense of Washington holding Stanford scoreless in the first and the third at Husky Stadium in Seattle. Oh, real quick, I'll get to that at the end. In Seattle, yes, pardon me. So Michael Penix Jr., the transfer from Indiana, said, I really like this kid. If Washington, again, all quarterbacks are going to get sacked, get hit a little bit, but he got banged up the last few seasons at Indiana. So that's one, if you know a little bit about him, that it was tough for Michael Penix Jr. And if you know, like I said, anything about his history there, it was frustrating for him. But 22-37, pretty good day, 309 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks for Michael Penix Jr. Now, Mckee, who I told you on Friday, Stanford quarterback, I definitely love this kid. NFL prospect wise, I think he's right there. Again, they did play a very tough team. They weren't able to get. They had a 100-yard rusher, did Stanford, but there were sacks given up too because Tanner Mckee had 13 carries, but for minus 33 yards. Casey Filkins, the running back, had 20 carries for 100 yards, 5 yards a carry. You'll take that any day. But Washington overall got to him with Tanner Mckee. And again, not compared to what Penix did. I mean, 22 of 37, 309, like I said, 2 touchdowns. Mckee only threw the ball 6 times, 17 of 26.
Another busy day.
286 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he did have 1 interception. So again, throwing for 286, rushing for 86, so under 400 yards of offense. Washington, on the other hand, man, Wayne Talapapa, the running back, 13 carries, 120 yards, 9.2 a carry for him, and he had 1 touchdown. And he had 120 of their 169 yards rushing for the Huskies. But 9.2 a carry. I mean, that is gouging a defense that is normally, again, very, very physical. But this Washington team, man, Kalen DeBoer, like we talked about, the head coach that they hired from Fresno State, his first year at Washington, David Shaw, obviously, I want to say that. Oh no. Well, I think he's the second longest tenured coach in the Pac-12. Off the top of my head, because like Kyle Winningham. But either way, David Shaw, a phenomenal coach, and it's but Washington, I mean, at home up in Seattle, they, like I said, absolutely balled out. Love what Michael Penix Jr. did. And like I said, Wayne Talapapa had a huge day on the ground. Receiving wise, both teams had guys absolutely ball out. Rome Odunze for Washington, 8 grabs, 161 yards, 20 yards of reception, 20.1. Don't want to jip him of that 0.1. All kidding aside, phenomenal day. And 1 touchdown. For Stanford, though, Michael Wilson, he had 6 snags, 176 yards, 29.3 per, and 2 touchdowns. And he had 176 of their 286 receiving yards. John Humphreys had 1 catch and for 17 yards, and that was a touchdown. And he had the only other receiving touchdown, for Stanford. Because, like I said, Michael Wilson had 2. But man, 6 for 176. But looking at this game, I just like overall when you say Washington's defense, both teams, in the first quarter, Washington gets the first quarter touchdown, 7-0. But just as the game went on, and man, for Washington, I mean, when you look at like their schedule, like I said, I mean, the early season schedule, they beat Portland. That was week 2. Week 1, Washington beat up on Kent State, and then they beat up on Portland State, 52-6. And then right before conference play, like I said, they had that very, very solid win at home against Michigan State, 39-28, coming into conference play. And then they open up week 1, like I said, against Stanford, and you get a 40-20 victory. And it's huge for Coach DeBoer. So they move up. They move up to 4-0. And if you're Stanford, though, again, there's parts you're encouraged about. But you just went up against a Washington team again, Michael Penix Jr. getting more comfortable with Coach DeBoer and the Huskies. But for their defense to ball the way they did too, and those first two games, I'll be with you guys. I say you can only play the team in front of you, but it's not like the NFL where, schedules are made, this and that. It's NFL teams. Yes, they get to pick who they play. Yes, the out-of-conference drives a lot of us crazy. Neither here nor there. But Michael Penix Jr. getting comfortable. You get a big win, like I said, over Michigan State. You stay at home. Stanford comes up. This isn't the last we heard of Stanford, though. Yes, they are 1-2. They are 0-2 in conference because they already had that early conference game against USC on the farm that USC was able to win 41-28. But Stanford, again, you're not going to want to – you're definitely not going to want to overlook this Stanford team. But, man, what Washington did to set the tone week one, well, for everybody else except for Stanford and SC, like I said, but week one of conference play, the Huskies, man, Michael Penix Jr., I said it, and people can say, oh, that's an obvious statement, Michael, if a quarterback stays healthy. It's just he played through injuries and battled through stuff in Indiana, what you would expect a quarterback to do. But he did have to miss some games. He has heck of a performances against in his career there against Ohio State, against Wisconsin, able to just, again, the young man can make plays with his feet, but yes, he can sling the ball down the field as he proved Saturday against Stanford. So I like it too. And I mean, defensively, Washington had, and this is crazy to me, this is the big stat, and I should have started with this, but I know this day and age, even though I say I love defense, I get sucked in talking offense right away. Washington had 8 sacks on the day. Sorry, I just want to let that sink in. I just double checking. They had 8 sacks on the day. And if you're Stanford and we lost 40-22, there's a lot of obviously playing behind the chains, getting pushed back. But the Huskies had 8 sacks on the day. Both Alfonso Tuputala and Braylon Trice, they had 2 each. So between those two, half of the 8 sacks, but 8 sacks on the day. Cam Bright also had an interception. Stanford had no interceptions and no sacks. That's the other side to this defensively. So look, did they prove they could put up points? Is this, and even if you say USC, people can say, oh, well, it wasn't SC's offense or Oregon's offense. Okay. But both those teams' defenses would have to try and they'll get the chance to ball with to try and see what they can do against Washington offense. But the Washington defense, man, they're not going to have 8 sacks every game. Yes, I do know that. But they have the potential to get that much pressure. That means what are quarterbacks going to do? Speed up the clock in their head. And Tanner Mckee, again, very talented, but look at it. You need to, he definitely probably sped up the clock in his head. And again, he threw the 1 interception, but did have 3 touchdown passes. So this Washington defense balled out 8 sacks. Yes, next time, mental note to myself, but out loud to all of you. We'll start with something like this. We'll start with what the defense did there, because 8 sacks, an interception, and 10 tackles for losses. I mean, that is just defensive domination against a team, like I said, very physical, very disciplined. You can run the ball, and they did that. So 8 sacks, 10 tackles for losses, an interception, and a quarterback that just played out of his mind. So hats off to, played very well. But hats off to UW. And Stanford, again, they fall 40-22 over, or they fall 40-22 to Washington. And man, you just, like I said, you just can't pat your defense on the back enough if they if they're able to do something like that and your offense complements them. That's what I was going to say. Complementary football. I always hear coaches talk about it, but if the defense is balling out like that and the offense is scoring, getting touchdowns instead of field goals, but either way, scoring, it leads to an avalanche of positive things for one team because they're just getting that momentum and going downhill. So those 3 games, again, absolutely huge. This next game we're going to get to is UCLA and Colorado real quick. Colorado is now 0-4. UCLA beats them 45-17. It was a 21-10 game at halftime. Colorado kind of hanging around right there, but UCLA, Chip Kelly and his offense explode for 17 in the third and shut Colorado out, and they each score a touchdown or 7 points in the fourth. So that's how we get to the 45-17. And for UCLA alum and Colorado coach, I talked about it on Friday, Karl Dorrell, man, it's just been tough sledding at Colorado for him. And when I look, again, when you look at what he's done, it's one of those things where you're like, wow. I mean, Karl Dorrell, you figure he knows the lay of the conference, and Boulder's a great place, obviously, to recruit to. So personally, it shocks me a little bit, the struggles that Colorado's having. But hey, UCLA and Chip Kelly, they're, like I said, they're out of conference. They got picked on. They struggled at home against South Alabama. But I will say this for Colorado. I mean, it's not going to get any easier. But looking at the on their schedule, but for UCLA, Dorian, Thompson, Robinson, they're I'm not going to make jokes about years, but with COVID, I mean, they're very experienced, very athletic quarterback. I will say this. He is a phenomenal, that's the word I'm looking for, weapon to have. They didn't have to throw the ball a ton. He was 19 for 23, which is phenomenal. Completion percentage there. 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And then for Owen McCown, the quarterback for Colorado, 26 for 42, 258, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. For the Buffaloes, they only rushed for 51 yards compared to UCLA's 249 yards. Let that sink in. 249 yards on the ground. And yes, I know you detractors out there will say, well, you're saying Colorado's struggling. It's not a surprise. But to throw for 266, to rush for 249, no matter who you're playing, you're keeping any defense on their heels. You're extremely balanced. 34 rushes, 34 team carries, 20 total, and then 29 attempted passes. So you're staying balanced, but they rushed for 249. Zach Charbonnet, 9 carries for 104 yards, 11.6 per carry for Mr. Charbonnet from UCLA. He had 3 rushing touchdowns and just a phenomenal week. Couldn't be stopped. And then you look at Dorian Thompson Robinson. Like I said, he had 7 rushes. Some of them were maybe 1 or 2 by design, but maybe some from pressure. But still, 7 carries for 56 yards, averaging 8 yards a carry. So, like I said, a team that rushes for 249, passes for 266. Because Ethan Garbers got in, the young quarterback for UCLA. He was 3 for 6, 32 yards, but he also did throw a touchdown. Receiving wise for the Bruins, both Jake Bobo and Matt Sykes had 4 receptions each. Bobo 53 yards, Sykes 48 yards. Sykes had one touchdown Connor Yankoff had 2 receptions for 5 yards, but he had 2 touchdowns. He had 2 receiving touchdowns. So, and his long reception was 3 yards. So, he also rushed for 7 yards on the day. But yeah, overall for UCLA, I mean, you look at it, Colorado said pass for 258, but only rushed for 51 yards. UCLA sack-wise, they had 5, which again is a good day, not the 8 that Washington had, but still they had 5 sacks on the day, 8 tackles for losses, and then the 1 interception by Carl Jones Jr. For the Bruins. No interceptions by Colorado. They had 2 tackles for loss and 1 sack in the game. So, but you say offense just took it to him. You got a quarterback like DTR, and you can run the ball. Obviously, they can run the ball with Charbonnet. It's UCLA again. They're 4-0. They're going to be they're going to be opening some eyeballs, and they can. And if you're supposed, you become a great team. Always hear coaches say game's not played on paper, so it's harder for coaches, especially in this day and age, to get players to I'm not going to say overlook teams, because again, they know who they're going against, but talented players. But you don't play the game on paper. But ever since on paper they should beat this team. Well, if a team's to the point where they're trying to go from good to great, as I've had coaches say to me before many different times, is that you beat the teams you're supposed to beat on paper, but then teams that you might not be favored against, that maybe should beat you start beating them. But you have to take care of the team in front of you, and no coach really ever coaches that way, because they pretty much cringe when I've asked them the question or even described it that way. I've heard from other coaches, and they concur, but it's still no successful coach is coaching that way. But for UCLA, man, you got DTR behind center and Charbonnet, and that's going to open up the receivers. I mean, it's obviously the passing game too. So it's again, UCLA beats Colorado 45-17. Again, tough sledding right now for Colorado and Carl Durrell. I get it, Buffs fans, you're frustrated, but it happens. It's one of those things where, unfortunately, it's a cycle. I do believe you can get it turned around, though. So we'll see what happens there. But UCLA, they improve to a 4-0. Colorado drops to 0-4 on the season. Now we will fast forward to Arizona, California. And man, what a game this was. I mean, 49-31. Yes, the Arizona defense did give up quite a bit of points, considering they gave up 14 points in the second, third, and fourth quarter. 14 points in each of those quarters. And then was trailing 14-7 at the end of the first. It was 24-21 Arizona at halftime. Cal blanked Arizona in the third, and then outscored them. Like I said, well, they put up 14, but Arizona put up 7. But man, Jaden DeLora, the quarterback for Arizona, this kid transferred in. He did have, I will give him 27 for 45, 401 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, but did have 2 costly interceptions. Pardon me. Jack Plummer for Cal. On the other side, 18 for 28, 245, 3 touchdowns, no picks. It's a Cal team, though. This is where it is, kids. They rushed for 354 yards on the ground. Arizona defense got gouged. They could not stop. And when I say could not stop, for those of you that watched the game, and I was just, man, I was like, they got to make some kind of adjustments. And they were trying. I'm not going to say they weren't trying to.
This St. Patrick's Day.
But Jaden Ott, 19 carries, 274 yards. That is 14.4 yards per carry. I mean, insane. And And to the cherry on top, 3 touchdowns. 3 touchdowns. Oh, and he also, they weren't working him hard enough rushing. Ott did have 2 receptions for 10 yards. So he averaged 5 yards a reception as well. But man, what a sick display by this Cal offensive line. And U of A defense, when you see the score, again, they have 49 points, but in spots, they were there. But man, Cal's offense, Justin Wilcox, it was a question coming in, what is this Cal team going to be? They lost quite a few close games last year. They weren't able to be, as Coach Wilcox has been there, they definitely improved. I'm not going to say that, but have they been consistent? Consistency has been a huge word thrown out with this Golden Bears team, with the Bears. And man, their offensive line after coming out into the second half, because like I said, it was 21-17. Cal was up at halftime, so it's a game right there. You come out in the third quarter and you set that tempo, and to get your quarterback, Jack Plummer, no picks for him. Receiving wise, like I said, nobody quite did what Ott did on the ground. The 19 carries for 274. Again, just let that marinate. Jeremiah Hunter had 5 catches for 82 yards and a touchdown. J. Michael Sturdivant had 3 catches, 60 yards. He also had a touchdown. The other receiving touchdown was to Kalike Latu. Kalike Latu had 2 catches for 26 yards and the receiving touchdown. 2 sacks, 6 tackles for losses for Cal, 2 tackles for losses for Arizona, no sacks on the day for Arizona. Arizona didn't have any interceptions. The 2 interceptions, like I said, Cal had. Daniel Scott had the 1. Isaiah Young had the other. But, man, it was to see what Ott did, it was a masterpiece. And the young man he wanted the ball more, to say the least. Going into the fourth quarter, once Arizona, once it was still 35-17 at the end of the third, and then obviously going into the fourth, I wanted to see what if the Wildcats again could come back, but get back in the game. But defensively, they need to step up. They need to help out. They need to try and contain Ott. I was going to say, you weren't shutting down, obviously. And he did have his longest run of the day, by the way, was 73 yards. So all around phenomenal day for Jaden Ott. But yeah, what Jetfish is doing at Arizona, again, they're 2-2 now, 0-1 in conference play. Cal moves up to 3-1. And we talked about that last game, non-conference for them, when they played Notre Dame. And man, it was a Hail Mary, and it gets tipped in the air, and it's coming down. There's a Cal receiver who's on the ground, and he's trying to catch the ball. His bobbles, and he just can't reach it. But yeah, that's the kind of confidence Cal had coming in to this. And Arizona, again, they had a tough one against North Dakota State. And people say, "Oh, State, yes, they've been FCS champions multiple times. They've won national titles, and they did win that game, but they did lose to Mississippi State in Tucson. But they did beat San Diego State. So again, what Coach Fish is doing, again, you see the 2-2 record, 500. You're like, okay, 0-1 in conference, that's tough. But man, it does hurt me a little bit, as you guys know. But no, the Wildcats definitely, all kidding aside, on the come up here. So they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. But defensively, again, you can't. I mean, I know, believe me, I'm not splitting the atom here for anybody. You can't get gouged for 274 yards by one guy, 354 yards on the ground, and think you're going to win the game, because the time of possession is going to be crazy swayed there. But yeah, for Coach Wilcox and the Bears, Golden Bears 49-31, they get the victory over the Arizona Wildcats, and they move up to 1-0. And our last game, yes, I'm not skipping it because of what I was wearing on Friday. The Utah Utes come into Tempe and beat the Sun Devils 34-13. ASU did not score a touchdown until the fourth quarter. That being said, it was a solid performance by the Utes. They ran their offense. They went up tempo. They ran it normal, but then when they started playing the tempo, Cam Rising had them moving the ball down the field. Defensively, they were able to just ASU penalty-wise, it was better for ASU. Not too many penalties. Pardon me. That's what I was going to say, punts, but they punted a few times. But yeah, when you look at Cam Rising's numbers real quick, he was 19 for 29, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did throw an interception in the game. And then Emory Jones was 21 for 36, 261 yards, 1 touchdown. But the Utes came up with 2 interceptions on the day. Valade, they only rushed the ball for 6 yards, ASU, because of Emory Jones. And I don't say because of Emory Jones. Emory Jones they sacked Emory Jones quite a few times, is what I'm getting at. Utah had 5 sacks.
When it comes to doing,
and yeah, Utah had 5
getting
sacks.
what you need starts with our
in the game. Yeah, Utah had 5 sacks in the game, and some of them couldn't come at worse times. I mean, ASU's one drive started at the 20. They ended up punting from, I think the line of scrimmage was like the 4-yard line. Back-to-back sacks on plays right there. And like I said, Utah comes up with 5 sacks, 8 tackles for losses, which goes back to the ASU rushing. They had 20 carries altogether for 6 yards, but Valade had 8 carries for 30 yards. As long was 13. They just, again, ASU, passing a little bit more. Like I said, 36 passing plays to 20 rushing plays. And Daniel Ngata had a great night in the return game for the Sun Devils, but only had 1 carry for 2 yards on Saturday night. But for Utah, Kyle Winningham, again, this team just physical, and people say discipline, but physical, and they can slow it down. They can run. They'll run their offense, but if they start sniffing blood, they go up tempo. Cam Rising. I mean, you look at Tavion Thomas had 11 carries for 60 yards. Jalen Glover had 13 carries for 48 yards. Cam Rising added 3 for 27. But overall, they rushed for 205 yards and threw for 260. So 465 yards to 267 yards. That's tough for anybody. Receiving wise, Thomas Yasmin had 1 reception, and it was for 72 yards. And again, heck of a play. Rising hit him down the sidelines. I think he was probably about 10, 15 yards downfield. He hit him. And the attempted tackling on this play was a little, I think, frustrating because they're trying to rip the ball out from a mammoth tree trunk of a tight end who's quick and not making the tackle. But yeah, 1 catch for 72 yards. Dalton Kincaid had 4 catches for 66. He had both of the receiving touchdowns from Cam Rising. And like I said, a team and Devon Veely had 6 catches for 63 yards. So again, 260 yards receiving for the Utes. And when you have 5 sacks, 8 tackles for losses, it's pretty tough to get anything going offensively if you're ASU. But you went up against the South's best, the Pac-12 South champions from last year, Pac-12 champions from last year. So it's a measuring stick. And yeah, Coach Iguano said it's not an excuse. We knew everything wasn't going to be, all the answers weren't going to be in a week. And it's not, and that statement from Coach Iguano, it's not blaming Coach Edwards. It's not about putting blame. It's just there was energy. There was ASU kept fighting till the end. Again, they did get the late touchdown, and that was Messiah Swinson had one catch for 11 yards, which I think he is a tight end, as big as he is, needs to be featured a little bit more, but that's just me. Elijah Badger did have a good game, 5 for 76. But yeah, Swinson had the one catch for 11 yards and the lone ASU touchdown for the night. But yeah, for Kyle Winningham and the Utes, I mean, that one loss to Florida, again, out in the swamp, driving down, and no excuse. He doesn't make excuses about it, but they gave up 283 yards rushing. And for a Utah team to do that, you see that, that's very, very shocking. So it'll be interesting to see where they go from here, both teams. But ASU, again, under Coach Wino, they go to Southern Cal next week, and they will take on the Trojans. Yep. ASU's taking on USC. So, well, before we get out of here, I just want to remind everybody, again, so glad you joined me here on the Sideline Sports Network, but schedule for next week. So there's a Friday game, and number 15 now, Washington, will go to the Rose Bowl and take on the UCLA Bruins, 7:30 p.m. on ESPN. So that's where you can find that. That's a Friday night game for those of you that, again, get frustrated with Friday night college football because it's high school night. But hey, either way, that's Friday night, Washington at UCLA. Then Saturday, the matchups. So Oregon State now, we'll see. Oh, God, what a matchup that's going to be. There's some fun matchups this weekend based off of what happened last weekend, but leading up to this point, even out of conference play. So Oregon State goes to Utah. That's an 11 a.m. kickoff. That's an 11 a.m. kickoff here at for everybody. So yeah, Pac-12 after dark and Pac-12 in the morning. Cal will go up to the Palouse and take on Washington State. Like I mentioned earlier, Colorado is going to Tucson and take on U of A, take on University of Arizona, take on the Wildcats. ASU, like I said, the Sun Devils headed to the Coliseum to take on the Trojans Saturday night at 7:30. And then Stanford and Oregon will wrap up play on Saturday night. Stanford's at Oregon at 8 p.m. Again, yeah, ASU USC kicks off at 7:30. Colorado and Arizona at 6:30. Cal and Washington at 2:30. And Oregon State and Utah at 11 a.m., like I said, and Washington and UCLA at 7:30 on Friday night, though. So I'm going to get out of here, obviously, on Pac-12 in review from the last weekend. Again, I want to thank everybody over at Sideline Sports. Again, JB Ellis, my brother, Eric Wilson. I'll see you tonight on the Sports Arena. Again, shameless plug, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific here on Sideline Sports. You can check it out. But I'll be back Friday, again, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern on Friday. And we'll be previewing all those awesome matchups I said. Hope everybody had a great weekend. And we will I'll see you again on Friday as we break down and preview these great matchups we will see next week in the Pac-12. I'm Michael Caratenuto. See you Friday.